She was molested by her half-brother when she was 6, and sexually assaulted again when she was 13. After 30 years of marriage, she and her husband treated each other with respect, but they never had a true conjugal life. Such a feminist pioneer who wrote a room of one's own filled her pockets with stones that day and walked step by step toward her freedom. When the water flows over the ankles with the coldness of early spring, it is like a gentle farewell. The moment the shoes came off, she broke free from the shackles and struggles of half her life. Perhaps only by letting the physical body fall asleep can the spirit get rid of the entanglement of madness and reach the other side of true freedom. This film is regarded by countless fans as the pinnacle of women's films. It uses Virginia's classic novel Mrs. Dalloway as the spiritual link. It describes the day of 3 women with different identities in different time and space, but cleverly reflects their lives. In the early morning of 1923, the mist outside London had not yet dispersed, and Virginia had woken up from her dream. Her eyes were empty and dull. The nightmare of depression had haunted her for years. Auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations, and the ultimate nothingness repeatedly drag her into the abyss. And the secular definition of madness makes her always live in the label of a patient, because she had multiple mental breakdowns and attempted suicide. Her husband Leonard took her away from the hustle and bustle and came to a secluded country town to recuperate. Leonard's love is filled with intense fear. He is afraid of losing his wife, and even more afraid that she will lose control of her mind again. But this careful protection, for Virginia, deprived her of the right to choose life in the name of love. You are not allowed to go out alone, and even the time you can write is limited, for a writer who regards words as his life and himself as his belief. This is equivalent to chronic suicide. A trace of defiance and stubbornness surged in her heart, so she declined her husband's lunch invitation and returned to her room alone. This is not just avoidance, but also a psychological retreat. She needs to escape the shackles in the name of love and reconstruct herself in a closed space. Only writing and being alone can make her feel that she is still truly alive. She lit a cigarette, and amid the smoke, she seemed to have an idea. Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself. These words were like a ray of light, tearing through her depression. She decided to use this as the opening chapter of Mrs. Dalloway to write about a woman's day. It was just one day, but she had to write her whole life in this day. What she writes is not only a novel, but also an inner projection of herself. She was not allowed to go out alone, so she asked Mrs. Dalloway to buy flowers and complete her journey to freedom for her. But soon, his thoughts were interrupted.
Excuse me, Mrs. Woolf. Mr. Woolf said I was to come and speak with you.
Leave it to me in the kitchen. I'll be done very soon.
The whispers in the kitchen never escaped her ears. The 2 servants scolded her unscrupulously, mocking her for having confused memory all day long and not being like ordinary people. In the eyes of others, she never seemed to be a talented writer, but just a crazy patient who needed to be looked after and pitied. In order to calm down her mood as soon as possible, she found her husband and hesitated for a long time before slowly speaking and saying that she wanted to go for a walk. Her struggle, pain, and desire for freedom were just eccentricities in the eyes of the mediocre. Who would have thought that such a seemingly submissive woman was once a pioneer of stream of consciousness literature and the core of the Bloomsbury Group? But at this moment, she was like a bird locked in a golden cage, its wings tightly bound in the name of stability and health. Those unexpected criticisms were like thin needles, piercing her already fragile nerves, making her even more disgusted with this suffocating rural prison, and death seemed to be her only escape. That afternoon, Virginia's sister Vanessa arrived with her 3 children, breaking the deathly silence at home. Vanessa is Virginia's only relative and a mirror of her spiritual world. Vanessa chose a secular marriage and family and lived a stable but ordinary life. Virginia chose literature and self, and lived in the spiritual storm. The children's noise made Virginia briefly feel the fireworks of the world, and a trace of tenderness flashed in her eyes. But when she saw the dying bird before her, that tenderness was quickly replaced by anxiety.
What happens when we die?
We return to the place that we came from.
I don't remember where I came from.
Nor do I.
When the noise subsided, Virginia slowly lay down and stared at the dying creature quietly. In her eyes, this little bird that is unable to fly and can only wait for death is another version of herself. She had her wings broken and lost the freedom to fly into the sky. The dying bird is like her soul that is constantly wasting away in depression and depression. He clearly longs to break free, but he can only let his life force be eaten away bit by bit. Time comes to Los Angeles, USA. In 1951, housewife Laura slowly woke up from bed, and her husband was preparing breakfast for her downstairs. She picked up the book beside her pillow and read the familiar words. Mrs. Dalloway said she was going to buy flowers herself. In the eyes of outsiders, Laura has a perfect life, a husband with outstanding military achievements, a gentle and considerate husband, an innocent and lovely son, a prosperous and stable middle-class life, and a second child who was about to be born in the belly, but everything that others envied was an airtight golden cage to her. She played the role of the perfect wife meticulously, but she showed a tired and numb look after bidding a sweet farewell to her husband. Without the attention of others, she no longer needs to pretend to be satisfied with her marriage. Even facing the children around her, she only has the patience to hold on. Before marriage, she was a girl who loved reading, longed for freedom, and had her own thoughts and pursuits. But in the United States after World War II, society's expectations for women were firmly framed in the role of returning to the family. Taking care of husband, raising children and taking care of housework seems to be the only value of women. Laura was caught up in the current of the times and lived a life that everyone envied, but her soul gradually withered in the triviality and repetition day after day. To celebrate her husband's birthday, Laura decided to make a cake by herself. She was busy in the kitchen, matching every ingredient in proportion, but the cake failed again and again. She suddenly realized that her life was like this cake. She followed the recipe step by step, but it was never what she wanted. Just at this moment, the doorbell rang loudly. The sudden visit of neighbor Lottie became the only disturbance in this dull afternoon. Lottie has exquisite makeup and well-dressed clothes. She is a perfect female model according to the standards of that era, but there is unconcealable anxiety and fear in her eyes. She is facing the dilemma of being unable to have children due to a hidden physical illness.
I mean, I've been really happy with Ray. Where the joke is, all my life I could do everything, except the one thing I wanted.
Laura took off all her stiff disguises in front of Lottie, and her eyes unconsciously revealed distress and tenderness. She took the initiative to hug Lottie and comfort her. The moment their lips and teeth touched, she felt the heartbeat and excitement she had never experienced before in this suffocating marriage. Laura clearly knows that what she really loves is the warmth and bond between women, but this pure emotion was a taboo that could never be seen in the light of the social environment at that time.
Kitty, you didn't mind? What? I didn't mind what?
After Lottie left, the room returned to dead silence. Laura's heart, which had just shimmered with light, fell into deeper despair again, but what suffocated her even more was her son's ever-hot gaze. She has never really longed to be a mother, has no desire for the bond between parent and child, and has no brilliance of motherhood in the worldly sense. When her son sticks to her side, she always forces a smile to deal with it. But this kind of performance that went against her nature had already exhausted all her energy. She dumped the failed cake into the trash can and made a perfect birthday cake again. After making this qualified cake, she felt relieved as if she had completed a heavy task. Immediately, she entrusted her son to a neighbor and drove away resolutely on the pretext of going shopping. The young son seemed to realize something, struggled to break away, and cried heartbreakingly. But Laura never looked back even though she had tears in her eyes. She slowly took out the sleeping pills she had prepared from her bag, and then took out the book Mrs. Dalloway that had been with her for a long time, trying to use Virginia's words to put her broken soul to rest. Gradually, she felt that her whole body was wrapped by an invisible force. The cold lake water came from all directions, covering her mouth, nose and chest bit by bit. A huge suffocation gripped her throat. The weight and pain of the past turned into rushing water, completely submerging her. She imagined the peace of relief, but at this moment, she touched the child in her belly. The fetus moved slightly, and the weak fetal movement was like an electric current, hitting her heart. On the other side, Virginia is still obsessed with creation. The two nephews laughed at him, but only the niece came forward to ask worriedly. Virginia originally wanted to kill her heroine, but she changed her mind. The warm family lunch soon came to an end, and her sister was about to leave for home. Virginia felt an unspeakable sense of loss and loneliness in her heart. This brief reunion was one of the few lights she had when she was trapped in the dreary countryside. Now that the light is about to go out, the depression and restraint in this house are sweeping over again, making her pursuit of spiritual freedom even more determined. In the evening, Virginia sneaked out of the house without Leonard's attention and ran to the train station. She wants to go back to London, to a place where she can feel alive and where she can create freely. After realizing it, Leonard chased after him like crazy, and the two had an unprecedented quarrel.
I went for a walk.
A walk! Leonard demanded that she go home because dinner was ready, but Virginia bluntly said that there was no obligation to keep her back at the table. Leonard gave up the prosperity of London, moved to the countryside, and worked hard to open a printing shop. spending everything he had just to protect her, but she regarded all of this as a painful prison. At this point, his long-suppressed emotions completely exploded.
It was done for you! It was done for your betterment! It was done out of love! If I didn't know you better, I'd call this ingratitude.
I am ungrateful. You call me ungrateful? My life has been stolen from me. A life I have no wish to live.
In Leonard's world, staying alive is everything. As long as Virginia is still around, he can accept it no matter what. His love is the most profound and sincere salvation in the world. It has nothing to do with right or wrong, but he doesn't understand that some souls cannot breathe in the world.
I'm dying in this town!
Virginia tells him that she is dying slowly in this small town. If she had to choose between staying and dying, she would rather die. She threatened death, declaring her absolute desire for freedom. Leonard reluctantly compromised and agreed to return to London the next day. Virginia looked at her lover in front of her and burst into tears. The deepest love in the world cannot save a soul trapped by depression and mental shackles, and Virginia's obsession with freedom is destined to not be accepted by the stability of the world. Both of them are sincere and affectionate, but they fall into an irreconcilable quagmire. This contradictory love was destined to be an unsolvable tragedy from the beginning. This time, Virginia won her freedom, but she also saw clearly her symbiosis with death. This quarrel is her ultimate resistance to being kidnapped by love, and it is also her last struggle before going to destruction. On March 28, 1941, after battling the disease for many years, Virginia filled her pockets with stones and walked step by step into the cold river, ending her 59-year-old life. In her suicide note to Leonard, she wrote that all the happiness in her life came from him, and that he had always been patient and kind to her. She had lost everything but the certainty of his goodness. She could no longer continue to ruin his life and believed that no two people could be happier than them. Since the shackles of life are so heavy, perhaps rushing to the end calmly is the most compassionate fulfillment of oneself. Virginia walked into the river and into eternal freedom. As she said, the death of the physical body is the liberation of the self. While the creation of literature allows the spirit to gain immortality, she also awakened another trapped soul in the world and completed her life of pursuing freedom for her. In the end, Laura chose to live. She wants to live for herself, even if she has to pay a huge price. After returning home, Laura forced herself to remain calm and celebrated Dan's birthday. Looking at the happy smiling faces of her husband and son, she felt full of guilt, but she also became more determined in her choice. She decided to leave after giving birth to her unborn child. Early that morning, she prepared breakfast, left a note while her family was sleeping, and left home resolutely. Later she went to Canada and started a new life there. Her life confirms the belief conveyed by Virginia in Mrs. Dalloway: even if life is full of pain, you must have the courage to live for yourself. Time comes to New York in 2001. The cities at the turn of the century had already broken the shackles and taboos of the old era. Clarissa got up early as usual. After finishing washing, she calmly decided to buy flowers by herself. These words, which were once words of resistance and longing, were just everyday words to her. She has an independent life and a same-sex partner. She does not have to die in exchange for freedom, and she does not have to abandon her home to pursue herself. She is the real-life Mrs. Dalloway who lives in the present. Holding the flowers she had just chosen, she walked into an old-fashioned apartment building hidden in an urban alley. The house was in chaos and never saw the light of day all year round. Here lived a poet named Richard, who was extremely talented but was severely weakened by the advanced stages of AIDS. Richard was Clarissa's young lover and now her best friend. He is about to receive the Lifetime Achievement Award, which represents the highest honor in literature. To this end, Clarissa decides to prepare an elaborate celebration party for him. Richard was seriously ill and his body was weakening day by day, but his spirit was extremely clear-headed, even with a keenness to see through the world. Richard's life is the ultimate rebellion against perfection. He was talented when he was young, but he suffered from sexual orientation and illness. He refused to conform to worldly expectations and insisted on being himself. But the pain of the disease and the passing of life made him gradually lose confidence in life. As he looked at Clarissa working for him day after day, he seemed to see another version of himself, bound by the expectations of others and losing himself. And that's exactly what happened. Clarissa is enthusiastic and capable, good at managing interpersonal relationships, and is always busy and dedicated to others. Her life revolves around others but not herself. She and her partner have been together for 10 years, but their relationship has always been dull. She loves Richard deeply, but because of his sexual orientation, She can only protect him as a friend. She was busy taking care of everyone's emotions and meeting everyone's expectations, but she forgot to ask herself what she really wanted. In the evening, the party is about to begin. Clarissa returned to Richard's place and wanted to pick him up to attend the party, but she didn't expect that Richard suddenly regretted it. He said he no longer needed the party. Richard approached the window while recalling the past between the two of them. He has been tortured by AIDS for half his life, and the trauma of being abandoned by his mother in childhood remains with him. Worldly awards, applause from others, and lively parties are nothing to him, and cannot heal the desolation and pain deep in his soul. He was tired of lingering in pain, tired of being Clarissa's mental burden, and tired of using external recognition to redefine his own value. Clarissa's careful care and persistent retention are love, but they are also gentle shackles, trapping him in this broken body. Unable to rush to the liberation he has longed for, Richard told her that he insisted on living until now because of her, but now she must let herself go. He thanked her for her kindness and expressed his last love to her by calling her Mrs. Dalloway. As soon as he finished speaking, he used all his strength to jump out of the window and ended his life. Before Clarissa could shake off the pain of her best friend's sudden departure, the elderly Laura quietly appeared at the door. This mother who resolutely abandoned her husband and young son and escaped from the prison of her family finally came to the end of her son's life. The years have left traces of vicissitudes on her body, but her expression has always been calm and indifferent. This dialogue is the ultimate confrontation between secular morality and soul self-salvation. Clarissa has lived her whole life for others, while Laura is an awakened person who was forced into a desperate situation by the discipline of the times. When Laura calmly spoke of her suffering and choice, the anger and obsession in Clarissa's heart gradually dissipated, replaced by deep empathy and relief. That night, the party was cancelled. Clarissa stood alone in an empty room, without busy chores or other people's needs. For the first time, she truly faced her own heart.
To look life in the face, always. To look life in the face and to know it for what it is. At last, to know it, to love it for what it is, and then to put it away.
She always thought that she was saving Richard, but in fact, she was taking care of Richard to escape the emptiness in her heart, and she was also proving the value of her existence, until Richard's rebirth towards death became the sharpest knife that shattered this illusion. She finally understood that the meaning of life never lies in catering to other people's expectations, but in finding the true self. As Virginia said, "If no one gives you flowers, buy them yourself." Buying flowers is a tiny act of independence, and independence itself is a revolution. The most touching thing about the film is that it does not praise the perfect independent woman, but shows the price of independence. Virginia sacrificed her life. Laura suffered the infamy of abandoning her family and children, and Clarissa experienced the pain of self-denial, but still chose to be loyal to herself. We may not have Virginia's genius, Laura's courage, or Clarissa's choice, but independence is never an unattainable ideal. Instead, we refuse to be defined and strive for a small amount of autonomy at every moment.